Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and we have a super cool, this isn't a historical weapon, this is literally living in the future. And I am joined with one of its designers, David.
How's it going?
So who are you exactly?
My name is David Wirth. I'm the co-founder of Arcflash Labs. And this is the GR1, the first commercial Gauss rifle.
What can I say? It's actually a Gauss rifle. This is legitimately living in the future.
Yep. Sci-fi come to life.
All right, so I am curious about how this came to be, but I'm also curious about the history of electromagnetic. I shouldn't say firearms because it's not actually a firearm.
Yep.
A firearm is a legally defined term that involves propelling a projectile with combustion. Yep. This is not combustion. So actually, why don't we start with, real quick, how does this work?
Sure, yeah. So basically we have a battery that stores energy in the form of electrical charge. The battery is stepped up to high voltage, which charges capacitors, which release high voltage into coils of wire. When a ferromagnetic projectile enters the coil, the gun switches these coils on, creating a large magnetic field. The large magnetic field is created in front of the projectile, which sucks the projectile towards it. It gains speed, it goes into the next stage, which accelerates it more, et cetera, until you reach a high velocity.
Okay, so there's a lot of careful engineering that goes into this, because if each coil, and I assume we've got a coil for each of these cylinders, is a capacitor.
Exactly.
And there's a coil with each one. Well, if that coil stays active a little too long, it stops pulling the projectile towards it, and it starts pulling it back.
Exactly, it oscillates. Oh. This is known as suckback.
Highly technical terminology. So you said this is, well, okay, one other question before we dive into it. Gauss rifle, coil gun, railgun, are there differences in these terms? And if so, what is this one?
Excellent question. So this, we consider it a Gauss rifle. Gauss rifle and a coil gun are kind of interchangeable terms. They both involve attracting a projectile and accelerating it through reluctance, magnetic reluctance. A railgun is a completely different system. A railgun accelerates a projectile by the Lorentz force. It's basically the projectile is pushed by the magnetic field, is pushed by magnetic repulsion, versus a Gauss rifle or coil gun works by magnetic attraction.
Okay. That actually, it's just a really interesting, very basic sort of differentiation. So Gauss rifle is actually an appropriate term. That sounds to me like something literally out of a movie that couldn't possibly actually be technically accurate.
Yeah, so Gauss is the unit of magnetic field, right? So that's just kind of another way of saying it's a gun that uses magnetic fields. Okay.
So you said this is the first really commercially available Gauss rifle. Have other people been trying?
Absolutely.
How long has this been going on?
I think the first electromagnetic guns, people were playing around with it back in the 30s, 40s, right around, basically since electricity has been invented, since motors were invented, people were working on linear motors. It's only a natural course of thinking to try and accelerate a projectile with it. What really defines what we're making here at Arcflash Labs is it's a portable handheld Gauss rifle that's enabled by our patented charging technology and the high energy storage of lithium-ion batteries.
I figured the batteries were going to be a big part of it.
Absolutely.
When you said 20s and 30s, that's not that far off from early electric cars, which are largely made possible by battery technology. So this is, though, not just batteries, but also the ability to very quickly discharge a large amount of energy in a controlled manner?
Yes, so charging and discharging. The discharging is controlled by semiconductor switches. These are relatively new invention, but really the most recent innovation has been the ability to charge a large capacitor bank in under a minute. Right? The amount of charge that this thing stores, it's roughly 3 kilojoules, and using a normal capacitor charger, this would take several minutes to charge, but we managed to charge it in 3 seconds.
Okay. I guess, correct me when I get to something that's wrong, but as I understand it, the whole purpose of a capacitor is to hold energy for a short period of time and be able to discharge it almost instantaneously.
Exactly.
As compared to a battery, whose job is to hold energy for a long period of time, but typically has you have to pull energy out of a battery more slowly.
Exactly.
And you've figured out how to kind of balance that.
Exactly. The maximum discharge rate of one of these batteries is in the hundreds of amps. The maximum, well, the peak current through one of these coils is in the thousands of amps. Right? So we need a technology that can discharge several thousands of amps in a repeatable fashion.
Okay. And for people who haven't already read some of the press releases and such on this, what velocity do you get and what weight of projectile do you get with this?
So the projectile, you can accelerate any number of different kinds of projectiles. Anything under roughly a ½ inch and anything between 1 and 2 inches in length, you can accelerate pretty effectively with this gun. The maximum velocity we found is around 75 meters per second.
Okay.
What was the other question? Max weight?
Yeah, well, in the firearm space, everything is always a balance of projectile weight and velocity. And generally, you can change one and the other will change relative. So,
yes.
So 75 meters per second or 200, 230 feet per second is very slow by firearms standards. But from looking at these projectiles,
Yep.
that's a pretty big honking projectile.
Yeah,
now it's steel, not lead, but I'd have to weigh this. This feels like it's probably like a 250, 300 grain.
I think that one's about 500 grain.
Okay.
Yeah, so the smallest projectile we put through here is roughly an ounce. That's the ones we were firing a little earlier. These are a little closer to 2 ounces.
Okay. Yeah. So relatively low velocity, but a relatively heavy projectile.
Exactly.
Is there a reason that you specifically went for 50 ½ inch? I say 50 caliber, which it is, for ½ inch. I know you had some earlier smaller designs that use much smaller diameter projectiles.
So that's an excellent question. So it goes back to the differences between coil guns and rail guns. Coil guns get more and more efficient with larger projectiles. That's why they're called mass drivers, is they're good at accelerating large masses, but they're capped at a maximum velocity. It's due to the suck back, right? As the projectile goes faster and faster, you need higher and higher voltage to reduce suck back.
Okay, that makes sense. And you have less and less time to actually be working on the projectile.
Exactly, exactly. With a railgun, railguns excel at very high velocities but lower masses.
Interesting. So do you think in the future, as this technology matures, we're going to see both railguns and coil guns competing for market, I guess?
That would be, it's possible. The problem with railguns is it's a much harder technology to fit into a portable form factor, and the rails erode.
Okay.
Right? So with a coil gun, there's no contact between the projectile and the barrel. With a railgun, there's a plasma discharge, and the rails themselves are ablated with each shot, so they have to be replaced.
Plasma sounds, on the one hand, dangerous, and on the other hand, yes, if you have a literal plasma involved, it's going to be deteriorating all sorts of stuff.
Exactly.
In the gun. Okay. So what is your target market with this? Why did you guys at Arcflash Labs start doing this? Other than the fact that it's incredibly cool, which goes without saying.
That's a great question. So we're doing this as a prototype to develop the technology. We believe that the ability for capacitors and energy storage technologies to store large amounts of power has been increasing over the years, right? It's a fairly linear trend. Right now, the energy storage of capacitors is roughly on par with air rifles. But if this trend continues, this historical trend, the energy density of capacitors will eventually surpass firearms. So what we're doing right now is we're setting the stage for the advancements in electrical storage technology.
That's interesting. I guess I've always been sort of fixated on the battery technology.
The battery is very mature. There are lots of applications for lithium-ion batteries, and people have poured a ton of research into it. High voltage capacitors, there's been much less research, and there's much more room to grow in that area.
Interesting. But you are seeing the technology develop.
Absolutely.
Slowly but continuously, sort of?
Absolutely. It's advancing at a known rate, and if the trend continues, this technology is going to be the future of firearms, we believe.
Okay. I made the mistake of reading some of the comments on various news releases about this from when you guys first announced it. And there seem to be quite a lot of people who have this attitude of, well, look at this thing. It weighs 20 pounds. It has the ballistic capability of maybe a 22 short. That's garbage. Pointless. And they seem to have this like binary perspective of you can either have this or you can have whatever fancy modern firearm you want. The reality is exactly the opposite. Like, this is the equivalent to a Wright brothers aircraft.
Exactly.
Which you could very easily look at and go, it flew 200 feet. That's like, what could you ever possibly do with a 200-foot flight in an airplane?
Exactly.
Worthless. Don't even bother. So
yeah.
I'm very excited to see something like this. Now, how long have you guys been working on this?
This particular gun, the GR1, took us about 2 years to advance from theoretical models to where it's at today, where we're beginning to ship models out to customers.
Okay. And before that, obviously this, I expect, this isn't your first, this ain't your first goat rope.
Yeah, so Jason, my other co-founder, and I, we've been working on electromagnetic armaments for roughly the past 12 years. So some of our first prototypes were back in 2010, mostly coil guns. I came up with the first portable railgun in 2015, and then we founded Arcflash in 2017 to start making commercial variants of this technology.
Okay, so you've actually dabbled in railguns as well as coil guns.
Absolutely.
That's cool. That's one of those like early foundational things of, yeah, we tried it and realized this is the side of the technology that is going to be practical for development.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular goals?
Right now, we're trying to expand the company. We're trying to create a minimum viable product that we can sell to a wider audience, something that's going to be a little bit more practical than a 20-pound Gauss rifle. That's basically it. We're trying to see where this technology goes, see what it can do, and expand our research into other areas that this technology can benefit from.
Okay, so it's more working on making it more and better, not a specific, discrete application or object that you're trying to build up to.
Right. It's going to be an incremental process of improvement. Right now, we're working on reducing the weight of this system. We're kind of coming at it from two angles. Our other, the EMG-1, which is our smaller kind of BB gun-like coil gun, we're trying to improve the power of that, and we're also trying to reduce the weight of the GR1. So we're coming at this minimum viable product from two different angles.
That makes sense. All right, so you already said, I think, that there is no physical contact between the projectiles and the barrel in this system.
Theoretically, yeah.
If all goes well.
Exactly.
So it must be a smoothbore barrel then.
Yes.
Obviously, I mean, I've looked at your projectiles here, and they're essentially smooth steel dowel rods.
Exactly. That's what they are. They're dowel pins.
So at this point, I would expect this isn't a massively accurate system?
No, it's not. It's a smoothbore. It'll hit a target with reasonable accuracy at about 20 to 30 feet. We've tested this fairly well. It's got a laser for aiming. It also indicates the state of charge with the laser.
Wait. It indicates the state of charge with the laser?
Yes.
How does that work? That sounds cool.
The laser is tied to the computer, and as the capacitors charge, the laser blinks faster and faster until it goes solid when the capacitors are charged.
And you're probably going to tell me it also does the super cool sci-fi thing of like physically going as it charges.
That's actually that's not a speaker. That's the transformers in the charger vibrating faster and faster with the amount of current that's going through them.
Okay. So that's sorry. So I
it does actually make that noise.
That's so cool. Literally living in the future. Okay, so you've got a laser for aiming.
Flashlight for seeing things in the dark, although it's not the most powerful flashlight in the world.
Ironically. 20 pounds of energy storage on it, and the flashlight's like, But you don't want to waste energy on light. You want to waste energy on throwing a mass down the barrel. So we have 3 different magazines there, and they're all different lengths.
Yep.
So variability of projectiles, I'm expecting.
Yep. Yeah, as you said, there's no chamber, right? Because there's no expansion of gases, so you don't need any confinement on the back of the breech, right? So the solenoid, which is the thing that pushes the round out of the magazine, is adjustable, so you can move that back and forth. By moving the solenoid, you move that entire back section, and you can insert magazines of different size.
So short, long, long.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, is there a particular reason someone would want one size projectile over another?
That's kind of why we're selling this gun, is to see what people come up with. It's an alpha model, it's a development prototype. We want to see what customers do with it. We want to see how people use this technology.
Okay. So not having rifling, smoothbore, inaccurate, essentially, that's a significant limitation on the system. Is there a way to do that? Like, I started thinking about fins. Like, could you use angled fins on the projectiles or something? Obviously, that makes the projectiles harder to do. Is this something that you guys have thought about?
Yes, absolutely. So one option we've considered is fins. You could obviously do that with the system right now. You could put fins on the projectiles. Of course, that makes them harder to manufacture. The other option that we're strongly researching right now is electromagnetic rifling. So the ability to use the armature, which is what we call a round as an armature, to use that like the armature of a motor and exert a magnetic field on that round that spins it up while it's traveling through the barrel.
That would be cool.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Huh. All right. So your barrel is not obviously it's not a traditional firearms type barrel because there's no contact. So it's just plastic?
Exactly. It's polycarbonate.
Okay. Yep. Is there, it seems like if the projectile's not touching the barrel, you don't technically even have to have a barrel, do you?
Technically no, but practically yes. You obviously want some kind of insurance to make sure that if a projectile is scratched or slightly off center, that it doesn't go and go into the electronics compartment. Because obviously, if people are going to be making their own rounds, as we've advertised it's possible to, those rounds could be slightly off, and we want some insurance.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Yeah, dude, the idea of that'd be brilliant to spin the projectile itself as you're accelerating it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Obviously. Yeah. Okay, so there is basically a small computer built into this thing too.
Yeah, there's 3 computers.
This is like all the sci-fi stuff of you actually turn on the gun and then program the gun. So with that being the case, have you put in fancy customizable things? Like, at this point, I'm not even sure what the possibilities are.
Exactly. This is
but
just
I'm sure you've thought about that.
Yeah, there are a number of things you can do now that there's a computer controlling the firing process. Obviously, we don't want to put too much sophistication in this because we want to make sure it's robust and reliable. After all, it is a gun. In other words, we don't want to be putting Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or hackable things in here. However, one thing you could do is you could put a laser rangefinder on the front and have the gun adjust the muzzle energy to compensate for the range to target. You can adjust the laser to indicate the state of charge. You can put an energy restriction on the capacitors, so you can set the maximum energy and the gun won't charge any more than that limit.
Okay, which would allow you to fire more quickly.
It allows you to fire more quickly. It could prevent over-penetration. It could be useful for less lethal applications.
Okay. That is super cool. I'm really excited to actually take this thing out on the range. And in fact, I'm going to take this thing to a backup gun match. It's going to be, I'm pretty well known for taking weird stuff to that match. This is going to totally take the cake, and this will be super cool. So, anything else you want to tell people about what you guys are doing?
So it's the GR1 is available on our website. We're continuously improving what we're making and what we're selling. If you're interested, come and check us out, and stay tuned for what's to follow.
So I think the caveat is this is very much an alpha product.
Exactly.
This isn't an actual sci-fi soldier-proof.
Right. This is
deadly blastomatic. It is very much unsafe to be downrange of. Like,
yes.
This is potentially lethal.
Yep.
You have to treat this like a firearm.
Yep.
But it is very much a work in progress.
Exactly. It's a development prototype.
All right. Well, awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
You bet. All right, guys. Stay tuned. We'll be doing some more coverage of the GR1 here specifically, as well as their other smaller or more BB gun style of like, this is the rifle, that is the pistol, sort of. And like I said, we'll be taking this out to a backup gun match. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching.